Now at 5, chaos in New Orleans. A New Year's celebration ends tragically as a truck drives into a crowd of people on Bourbon Street.
Police were everywhere. Bodies of folks were just running through the streets.
At least 10 people dead and dozens more injured.
The FBI is investigating the attack as an act of terror and says that driver may not have acted alone.
We do not believe that Jabbar was solely responsible.
Tonight, what investigators are uncovering about the attacker's background? Good evening, I'm Dick Brennan.
And I'm Cindy Hsu. Maurice and Christine are off. Police say the New Orleans attacker drove onto the sidewalk around a police car that was positioned to block vehicular traffic. At least 10 people were killed before the driver was shot to death by police. More than 30 people were injured. The FBI says inside the truck was an ISIS flag, weapons, and potential explosive devices.
Now a live look at Bourbon Street right now, where police remain on the scene. The suspect is identified as 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar, a U.S. citizen who'd previously served in the military. Police are now canvassing an Airbnb in the La Roque neighborhood of New Orleans that Jabbar rented.
And the Sugar Bowl between Georgia and Notre Dame that was set to take place in New Orleans tonight will be postponed. It is now scheduled for tomorrow. We have team coverage. Kati Weis is live in New Orleans. Lisa Rozner is in Times Square with how the city is responding to the attack. And we start with Doug Williams, who has the very latest on the investigation. Doug.
Well, Dick and Cindy, you just laid out what we've learned in the 14 hours or so since this horrifying tragedy occurred. But as we learn more, it seems the scope of the investigation grows wider and further beyond the actions of just one man.
We were in the middle of the road and managed to run off the road onto the sidewalk.
A surviving witness describes the terrifying moment that an electric Ford pickup truck sped into a crowded Bourbon Street in the early hours of New Year's Day. At least 10 people were killed, dozens more were injured, and many remain in local hospitals. The FBI took control of the investigation shortly thereafter and has identified the man responsible as 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar, an American citizen and Army veteran from Houston, Texas. Law enforcement officials say he eventually exited the truck with a rifle and body armor and shot and injured 2 responding officers before police returned fire and killed Jabbar at the scene. Explosive devices were also discovered in and around the scene. Bomb squad technicians were brought in to determine their viability and disarm them, meaning the bodies of some of the victims remained on the scene late into the day on Wednesday.
My priority will continue to be to ensure that victims that remain on Bourbon Street now will be serviced and removed as soon as possible. The mission now is to facilitate, support, and coordinate safety procedures to keep our residents and our visitors safe.
The FBI says that an ISIS flag was found inside the truck. Their findings thus far leading the FBI to the ominous conclusion that Jabbar was not acting alone.
We're aggressively running down every lead, including those of his known associates.
New Orleans is set to host 2 massive events in the next month and a half at the Superdome. First, the Sugar Bowl, set to take place tonight between Notre Dame and Georgia, has been postponed 24 hours. Then, February 9th, New Orleans hosts the Super Bowl. As a result, the city's been in the process of upgrading bollards, guarding the streets of the French Quarter that are closed to cars, specifically from this type of attack. And surveillance video obtained by CBS News shows Jabbar avoid the barrier and make a hairpin turn around a police car as he accelerates.
We could go on what ifs forever. This is evil. Where there are defects in this system, we are going to be transparent. And we are going to address them with the city and make sure that we fill those gaps.
And CBS News has learned that Jabbar did rent an Airbnb nearby and that a fire actually broke out at the Airbnb today. As investigators examine a potential link between the two, we're told by law enforcement officials they believe Jabbar had help in making the explosives and are now analyzing video of multiple accomplices. So local and federal police are there now at the Airbnb, but have to proceed with that same caution they did at the scene on Bourbon Street due to bomb squads being needed to enter. Dick, Cindy.
Still very early in the investigation.
Absolutely. We're still learning a lot minute by minute.
All right, Doug, thanks very much.
Well, joining us for more on the attack is CBS reporter Kati Weis, live in New Orleans.
On the scene around the time of the attack, tell us where you were and what was unfolding around you.
Yes, I was. Good evening, Dick and Cindy. It was just a little after 3 o'clock in the morning this morning. I was out with my husband for an impromptu celebration, just like many people celebrating the new year, bringing it in. And I happened to be right near where this whole tragedy took place. At first, I didn't know what was really going on, but as I stepped into a bar to take cover, I went up to a second floor area where I could see out of a window to get a better understanding, and I saw people receiving medical aid. I saw several people injured on the ground across Bourbon Street. Mind you, this is an area where it's a pedestrian-only zone. Lots of people are walking through the street, even into those early morning hours. It might sound early for some folks, but here in New Orleans, the party keeps going into the very, very early morning hours. So 3 a.m. is a normal time for a lot of people to be out at that time. Peak hours, if you will, especially for a party like New Year's Eve. So that really this party went from something joyous and exciting, bringing in a new fresh year, to something very scary, horrific. I talked with witnesses on scene who said that they saw the truck plow through that crowd of people on Bourbon. They also then heard the driver start shooting, and they immediately tried to take cover. I spoke with one woman who said that her husband just barely dodged the truck, that the truck actually clipped his ankle, but fortunately he's going to be okay. So certainly some very scary moments for a lot of people. Once we were allowed to leave the bar and police were corralling us out of the area to safety, we really got a full glimpse of just how horrific, how grim the scene really was. We saw people who were unconscious, we saw bodies on the ground, we saw blood on the streets. It was a scene I most certainly will never forget in my life.
Katie, what is the sense of how people are feeling now? And honestly, I want to know how you're doing. You not only saw this horrible scene, but have been working for hours now covering this story. How are you doing?
Thank you for asking. I'm doing all right. You know, we're all humans. We're all in this together. At the end of the day, we just have to have grace with one another, and I appreciate you for checking in. You know, it's important for me to help deliver this information to the country. I think that these kinds of situations happen all too often. And so, you know, it's my job to be a catalyst in informing people and letting them make their own decision to make sure that they can continue to stay safe. And speaking of safety, that is something that we're trying to get more information from city officials about. It was something that they spoke about in a news conference that I just attended just a few blocks from here. I'm in the French Quarter now. The news conference was at police headquarters, and police are saying, city officials are saying, look, we did what we could. There were some failures in terms of, you know, certain barricades could have been stronger, but ultimately the driver found his own way around, allegedly. And so here you can see we've got police who are trying to block off the French Quarter at many angles, far from where the actual scene took place. So they're doing what they can to keep people safe for that upcoming Sugar Bowl tomorrow.
All right, Kati Weis, CBS News reporter, we're glad you're safe, and thank you so much for your reporting for all this time. And the NYPD says it's closely monitoring the investigation in New Orleans.
The counterterrorism unit has seen this type of attack here. Lisa Rozner is live in Times Square. Lisa.
Well, Cindy and Dick, the NYPD has not identified any credible threats at this time. But I spoke with the Deputy Commissioner of Intelligence Monday. She told me the agency has been operating in a heightened threat environment since October 7th of last year. The confetti is still falling in Times Square, marking a new year and new concerns after a driver plowed into a crowd on busy Bourbon Street in New Orleans early morning New Year's Day.
I was surprised, especially at the beginning of the year. Everyone wanna welcome New Year, so it was sad.
Besides New Year's Eve, when you see cops on display, there is no police presence here. I'm actually floored that something like that has not happened yet.
Wednesday afternoon, we spotted 4 counterterrorism officers in Times Square. It comes on the heels of a record number of police at the crossroads of the world for the ball drop. This year, the NYPD extended the frozen zone where vehicles cannot enter to prevent a vehicle-borne attack. On Monday, we spoke with the Deputy
Deputy Commissioner for Intelligence and Counterterrorism about it.
And you mentioned car blockers. Is that going to be at every single block? And are those sanitation trucks?
Sanitation trucks, sand trucks, blocker cars. We use our own resources.
Law enforcement sources say a December FBI bulletin addressed concerns about vehicle ramming on New Year's Eve. Back in May 2017, a car crashed in Times Square, killing one person and injuring nearly 24. That driver was found not responsible due to insanity. And then in October 2017, in a proclaimed terror attack, Sayfullo Saipov killed 8 people on the West Side Highway bike path, running them down with a rented truck. Former NYPD Lieutenant Darren Porter says it also changed its policies.
In terms of how you engage an individual in a vehicle that's embarking upon violence against civilians. But now that policy has since changed, and now they're affording police officers the opportunity to shoot and injure and possibly neutralize the bad actor.
Mayor Adams says he is praying for the victims, and the city stands ready to offer any assistance to New Orleans. Now, Governor Hochul says there is also no credible threat in New York State, and she has directed the state police to be on high alert. We're live in Times Square. Lisa Rozner, CBS News New York.
Lisa, thank you. Our team coverage continues with CBS News law enforcement expert Rich Esposito. And Rich, the FBI does not believe the driver acted alone. What do we know about the video possibly showing accomplices?
Well, what we know right now is that multiple officials have said they believe he has not acted alone. And multiple devices appear to have been found in other locations, which would point to the same conclusion. Some of that will be on video that has not been released as yet. And what we see clearly on video is the attacker in the truck going around the police car that had been set up to block, driving straight into the crowd while opening fire with what appears to be an assault rifle on authorities and possibly the crowd. We're not sure on that yet.
Now, Rich, you and I, we know the NYPD, it seems like they're very much ahead of other departments in regards to this stuff, like the bollards. And of course, we had this attack back in 2017. What do you think they're doing now behind the scenes? I know Lisa Rozner was telling us the additional aspects to their coverage, but what do you think they're doing now behind the scenes?
The most important thing that's going on behind the scenes is looking at what intelligence did they have prior to the attack in New Orleans and what intelligence they might have now, to see if there are any links that could lead to New York, to Los Angeles, to another city. That's one of the key things. And then they're also going to be looking behind the scenes now to see what are the motivations behind this. Was it inspired by a terror group like ISIS or the Caliphate? Was it led by a group like that? Or were these people who were inspired just through the internet? Those are a couple of the things they're going to look at, how this occurred, were there any additional possible locations for attacks. They're going to look at all of that now.
All right, Rich Esposito, law enforcement expert. Rich, thank you so much for your insight. We are all following the latest developments as they come into our newsroom. You can find updates on this story anytime on CBSNewYork.com.